Hi everyone, it's Jennifer from Fiberflux. Welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you're here. Today is part 2 of our Learn to Crochet series. So those of you who are learning how to crochet or just want to brush up in your crochet, you have come to the right place. So before, I shared another video where we shared some of the basics, and today we're going to expand on those skills a little bit. We're going to do a little quick review of the materials, the very basic materials needed. We're also going to do a review of the slip knot and the chain. If you want to see that in more depth, check out the first video that I did. We're also going to learn how to do a very slow, detailed half double crochet tutorial, and a double crochet tutorial, and also a treble crochet. Those are like the really basic stitches. Now in the last video we did a single crochet tutorial, so check that out too if you're not familiar with that one. Crochet is such a happy activity. It brings joy to so many people, and I really hope that you like it as much as I do. So let's jump in and learn the basics of crochet part 2. Before we get started, be sure and hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel so much and I truly appreciate it. I have tons of crochet content on this channel. Many things are very beginner friendly, and every one of my video tutorials, I walk you through step by step and stitch by stitch. So check out my other patterns. You can find them by browsing the playlists, or I'll share some beginner playlists below too if you want to go right to those first. So let's jump in, and be sure and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. So today we're going to do a little bit of a review of our materials. In the part 1 video, we use this same hook and yarn. So if you had that from the first video, just use it for this one. I'm going to be using some medium 4 weight yarn and a 5mm H crochet hook. Check out the first video. I talked about selecting materials in greater detail in that video. So grab a little bit of yarn. And what we're going to do today is review the slip knot, the chain, also going to dive deep into the half double crochet, the double crochet, and the treble crochet, okay? Now, what we're going to do is begin again with the slip knot. And let me just come in a little closer so you can see up close what we're doing. So just to review, now I went into this in more depth in part 1, so definitely check out part 1 first if you haven't done that already. So what we're going to do for our slip knot is wrap the yarn around our fingers to make a loop. And we're going to kind of pinch it down with our thumb, back out with your fingers until we have a loop here that you're holding with your thumb. Then wrap the yarn behind that loop, reach in with your hook, bring up a loop, and tighten. So take these 2 tails, pull them down, and then you can kind of open them up to tighten into your hook. Now I did mention in part 1 that this is the way I like to do it. It's the way I was taught. I find it to be super easy and super easy to learn and show people. There are definitely other ways to do slip knots. This I find to be very easy. Okay, so we're going to begin by doing a chain. Usually you do a chain when you begin a project, okay? So we did this also in more depth in part 1, but we'll do a little review. So to make a chain, we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. Wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the loop. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the loop. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the loop. Again, we're reviewing, so check it out in part 1 if you want to see it very, very slow. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the loop, and make as many chains as you want, okay? So for the half double crochet, we're going to work into the 3rd chain from our hook. Now your pattern, if you're following a pattern, might be a little bit different in that number, but that's okay. We're going to not count this loop here on our hook. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, that 3rd chain from the hook. So for the half double crochet, we're going to wrap yarn around hook and insert it into that chain. Wrap yarn around hook again and bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops. And that's the half double crochet. Let's do that a couple more times. Wrap yarn around hook, insert the hook into that chain, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops. Just like that. Yarn around hook, insert it into the next chain, bring up a loop. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops. Wrap yarn around hook, insert it into the next chain, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops, okay? So there is a series of half double crochets. So let's pick up speed and just kind of do some more for the rest of the row, okay? So yarn around hook, bring up a loop, yarn around hook, all 3 loops. All right? So if you need to back up the video or use the slow motion feature, feel free to do that. We're just going to work half double crochets now in each chain across. Okay, so now we're at the end. We're going to work our last half double crochet. All right, so here is our little row. Now I'm going to show you how to move from row to row with half double crochet. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 2. This is typically what you'll do to change rows for half double crochet, but that being said, your pattern might be different, and that's okay. Sometimes it needs to change for certain reasons. Okay, so we did chain 2. Now we're going to turn our work over, okay? Now sometimes in a pattern you might see this counts as a half double crochet. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes your pattern may want you to work into that very first stitch. Sometimes if it counts as a half double crochet, you might work into the next stitch. Now just to review, the stitches are these little, you can see there's like light coming through them, these little loops at the top of our stitches that we just made, okay? So either way your pattern says, you might work into that first stitch, you might work into the next stitch. This might count as a half double crochet, it may not. It really depends on what your pattern says, okay? So let's go ahead and just work into that first stitch. Wrap the yarn around the hook, insert it into the stitch this time, wrap yarn around hook, bring up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops, okay? And then you're just going to do the same thing. Yarn around hook, insert it into the next stitch, bring up a loop. You have 3 loops on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through all 3 loops, and so forth, okay? And that is how you work the half double crochet. We're just going to work those in to the rest of our stitches, okay? Now, let's move on and learn how to do a double crochet next. For our double crochet, we're going to put a slip knot on our hook once again, and I'm going to go through this part a little quicker because we learned how to do this already. And we're going to do some chains. I'm just going to do a couple of chains, no particular count. Okay, we learned how to do some chains. So if you need to see the chain part, just back up or check out part 1 of this series. Now, for a double crochet, we're going to work into the 4th chain from the hook. Now your pattern might be a little different, but that's typically what you see. So this loop here does not count. You're going to go 1, 2, 3, and 4, that 4th chain from the hook. And so for the double crochet stitch, you're going to wrap the yarn around the hook, insert it into that chain that we talked about, wrap yarn around hook again, and bring up a loop. Then you're going to wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops, okay? And that is the double crochet stitch. Now let's do a few more together. Wrap yarn around hook, insert it into the next chain, bring up a loop, 3 loops are on the hook, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops, okay? And then we're just going to do this all the way across. The reason we're doing this in both chains and stitches is that I wanted you to see it both ways, okay? Because in patterns it will be both ways. Okay, so wrap yarn around hook, insert the hook into the next chain, bring up a loop, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops, wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the last 2 loops. And then you can just practice your double crochets as well. All these stitches are great to practice over and over and over again until they feel more natural. You will develop some muscle memory and you'll remember how to do them, okay? So just practice over and over. And here we are at the end. Again, you can back up the video at any time or watch the slow motion feature as well. So here is our row. So for double crochet, what we're going to do is we're going to do a turning chain. So we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and we're going to turn our work. Okay. And then now sometimes in a pattern, this chain 3 might count as a double crochet. Sometimes it might not. It just depends on what your pattern says. We're going to act as if it counts. So we're going to work into that next stitch. Again, the stitches are these loops at the top. See how you can see the light through them? All right, so we're going to work a double crochet in that next stitch. Wrap the yarn around the hook, insert it into that next stitch. Bring up a loop. 3 loops are on the hook. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the next 2 loops, okay? And we're just going to work our double crochets in each stitch across now, okay? Again, if you need to back up and watch the slow motion beginning part of the stitch, definitely feel free to do that, okay? So now we have our little double crochet swatch, okay? So that's double crochets. Let's learn our last basic stitch, the treble crochet, next. So for our treble crochet this time, we're going to work into the 5th chain from the hook. Again, your pattern might be a little bit different, telling you which chain to work into, but that's okay. I'm going to show you how to do it this way, but there may be variances in your pattern, just so you know, okay? Again, this loop here does not count. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in that 5th chain from the hook, let's learn the treble crochet. The treble crochet stitch, you wrap your yarn around your hook 2 times this time. Insert the hook into that chain, wrap the yarn around the hook, and bring up a loop. You're going to have 4 loops on the hook this time. So wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the next 2 loops. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the last 2 loops. And as you can see, this is a very tall stitch, okay? Let's do that a couple more times. Wrap the yarn around the hook 2 times. Insert the hook into the next chain and bring up a loop. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the next 2 loops. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the last 2 loops. And our next treble crochet stitch is done, okay? Let's do that one more time nice and slow. Wrap the yarn around the hook 2 times. Insert the hook into that next chain and bring up a loop. Wrap the yarn around the hook and bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the next 2 loops. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the last 2 loops, okay? All right, let's pick up a little bit of speed, and you can kind of see it in more of like a regular speed here. There's a slow motion feature on YouTube, and you can back up the video at any time. We're going to learn how to move from row to row next. So I'm just coming up to the end of the treble crochet row here, working in these last 2 chains. And I know I mentioned this before, but when you're learning how to crochet, work on your quality of stitches and the speed will come later, okay? So we have a little row of treble crochet. This time, to move from row to row, we're going to do our turning chain and do a turning chain of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 chains. Turn your work, and then we're going to work into the stitches. So the stitches hopefully will seem pretty familiar now because we've been doing different stitches so far, different stitches into stitches from previous rows. So we're going to work a treble crochet into this next stitch. So wrap the yarn around the hook 2 times, insert it into that next stitch of the row, wrap yarn around hook, bring up a loop. 4 loops are on our row. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the first 2 loops. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through the next 2 loops. Wrap yarn around hook, bring it through those last 2 loops, okay? So this part will be a little bit of a refresher, but you can just work your treble crochets in each stitch all the way across, okay? So the key here with all the stitches that we've learned today is to practice, practice, practice. It will feel awkward at first, it will feel unfamiliar, but I would recommend practicing your chains, doing lots and lots of chains. Then practice your single crochets and make lots and lots of them. Then practice your double crochets and your treble crochets and so forth, your half double crochets. Just when I first started learning how to crochet, I made lots and lots of swatches just like this, okay? So practice, practice, practice. And I'm going to put some projects if you want to learn some very easy beginner projects. I have a series and it includes a cowl, a scarf, a hat, and a blanket. The blanket is especially fun because it includes all the stitches that we've learned in this series and just repeats them and repeats them and repeats them. So it's a wonderful project to practice. So I'll put the link to those projects below. And I also have a beginner crochet playlist of literally hundreds of patterns you can try. So let's just finish up our little swatch. Now in part one, so at the end of the row, we'll just work our last treble crochet into just the top of that turning chain. Okay, so once your swatch is complete, you can cut the yarn. We'll just review this part. We did this in part one of the series as well. Wrap the yarn around the hook, bring it through the loop, and then just pull it tight. Then you can get a needle. This is called a tapestry needle or a yarn needle, and just thread your needle. And I like to go in one direction with my stitches, about an inch or so. Just go kind of through the middle of these stitches and bring it through. And then I like to also go in the opposite. Now you can kind of straighten that out. It will kind of, see if you can see here, it will kind of like pull it in, but I like to straighten it out, just make it look like it did before. And then you can go in the opposite direction with your needle. A lot of this is just feeling for it and making sure it goes into the right place. And then take it in that direction too, okay? And then just give your yarn a little bit of a snip. And then that tail will kind of disappear. And you can repeat that for the other tail as well. So our little swatch is complete. So I really hope you enjoyed this series. If you haven't seen the first part of this video series, check it out. There's some more basics in there as well. Again, there's some beginner-friendly projects. I made a playlist and the link is down below. You can check those out. Once you've learned all the basics and you're ready to do a project, there's lots of beginner-friendly projects that I have. So check those out as well. So happy crocheting. I hope crochet brings you as much joy as it has for me. And it requires a little bit of time and practice, but just keep crocheting and you can build your skills and you'll be doing all kinds of things in no time. I hope you enjoyed this series and I will see you in the next video. Bye everyone.